Hi, second years. So, having studied timber conversion, which is converting logs into planks, and then having studied how to dry out those in the seasoning process, either natural air seasoning or kiln seasoning, and then having studied about the defects that can occur either naturally or artificial through incorrect processes or poor practices, we're now going to deal with fungal attack. Okay, so fungal attack, I suppose, concerns. You may have heard the terms wet rot and dry rot in wood before, and learning about this can help us to prevent it from happening. On the left, you have an image of wet rot, which happens outside in wet conditions, and on the right, you have dry rot, which happens inside, typically in furniture. Okay, wet rot can occur in attic spaces, so that's where the outside and the inside get a little bit confused. But wet rot is generally where it's exposed to the elements and rain. Dry rot is where it's exposed to maybe a leak and it's inside. So fungal attacks. So they're caused by cause damage by feeding on the cells of the wood. As a result, the wood softens and eventually decays. Fungi need certain conditions to grow. Moisture content needs to be above 20%. This 20% level can be, I suppose, avoided if you use a kiln dried piece of timber. The moisture content is usually a lot lower than 20%. So when when timber is exposed to water, the moisture content of the wood goes above 20%, and that's when funguses like to attack and eat wood. I suppose the conditions, I suppose the wood itself is the food supply, and the oxygen, it thrives in stale, damp, moist air. This is the life cycle, I suppose, of that's just behind the image there. This is the life cycle of of what a fungus is. So where it starts, I suppose, where you here, I suppose, and I'll just get my pen here just to draw on the screen. It starts here, where spores develop, I suppose, on the wood. These spores then germinate, okay? Then they form mycelium. Then a kind of a fuzz grows on the wood, and then I suppose sporophores occur, and then that's when it starts to eat. Once it starts to eat, starts to reproduce, and the whole process will grow again, and that's when you've got the spread of that rot occurring. And once it goes round and round and round, you're going to have more and more fungus occurring. Okay, so the spores are blown around in the wind, carried by insects, animals, and unsuspecting humans until they come in contact with the timber. If the conditions for growth of dry rot or wet rot are present, it will attack and spread. So spores land on the wood, they germinate and spread like roots. The mycelium grow by penetrating the wood to feed and gain moisture. These can sometimes look like little holes on the wood. They turn into a white growth called sporophores. The sporophores produce tiny spores which spread to other wood, causing the fungus to spread to other wood and the cycle to begin again. Now you need to know this process and what happens. You may need to use it in an exam. Don't get too bogged down in the terminology. Okay. Fungus. There are two main types of rot caused by fungal attack. Wet rot, which is white in colour, and dry rot, which is brown in colour. Okay, so we've got wet rot here, which is kind of a whitish in colour on the outside of the wood. It only affects wood with a moisture content greater than 40%. So this is something like a fencing pole that is in a puddle of water in the middle of a field. Okay. Therefore, usually occurs outdoors. Fence posts, window frames, logs, doors. Can occur indoors if a structural defect, if there's a leak in a roof. Infected wood has a burned appearance with a white thread-like growth. Dry rot, mostly found inside. Fungi eat cellulose in the wood. Wood appears dry and gives off a musty, damp smell. Occurs in damp areas with poor ventilation. Fungi can penetrate through brick walls, able to spread extensively before the damage is first noticed, as it favours dark, damp environment. The small little holes on the surface of timber, I suppose, will be a dead giveaway that you've got some dry rot in your building. If you have dry rot in your building, or if you bring in a piece of wood that has dry rot into a room with lots of wood, that is when it has the potential to spread. And if it spreads, you'll have to, and we're going to talk about that later, how we treat that. You'll have to get rid of everything and burn it. So to prevent fungal attacks, you need to keep your moisture content below 20% and ensure there's adequate ventilation. The first photograph here is ventilation tiles in your roof, which allow loads of air into your roof space. The second image here will be a vent in a gable wall that allows air into and out of the attic space. And you'd also see on the bottom of your fascia boards maybe sometimes little kind of little grooves to allow air to circulate up in there. What tends to be the problem is houses, attics get insulated really well, but they forget about the ventilation. And the general rule is anywhere you insulate, you ventilate. So treating the fungus, I suppose the infected wood and surrounding wood within half a meter or 500 millimeters is cut away and burnt. The remaining timber and blockwork should be treated with a fungicide to kill the remaining infections and a preservative to prevent future attacks. Cause of the outbreak should be identified, so find the source of the dampness and prevent it reaching the wood. I suppose that would be fix the leak or wherever the water is coming from, and then to improve ventilation, so by drilling a hole in the wall and putting in a vent. The first question is the one that I want you to ask or to answer for me for this assignment, and it shouldn't take you too long. Okay, good stuff.